I think this is a wrong approach for many, many, many reasons. Methadone doesn't define what addiction really is. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. This is Dr. B, and today I want to consider a recent video by Vice News, and it is on a rural Maine backwater, as they describe it, detox for opiates, and they use pot. They advocate marijuana for the use of getting people off of opiates. I want to consider that, give you my thoughts on it. I think it will be useful, and it's also hopefully fun and educational to learn things from a formal perspective and my perspective. Let's get started. Okay, on Vice in general. Vice, I always thought of it as, without looking into it, as sort of a little bit edgy, progressive, thoughtful, reporting on the front lines with these sort of nerdy, progressive journalists that go out there and give you multiple sides of an issue. And I always enjoyed it because the shooting is done well and it's presented very well, until I watched one of the videos on Vivitrol for opiate abuse, and they got it horribly wrong. It was frightening how off they were. And since that time, 1 or 2 years ago, I've always looked at Vice quite differently. I've done 1 or 2 pieces on Vice. I think I did one of them on heroin and benzodiazepines and so forth. On this video, the setting is in Maine. It's sort of this in the woods detox where they use at times highly concentrated and at times high doses of opiates to get people go through what is traditionally called the detox period of opiate withdrawals. Okay, that's sort of the setting. And it's this sort of, again, this nerdy guy. I think a lot of them advocate a liberal approach to drugs in terms of both use and our response to the criminalization of drugs. They don't say that explicitly, but that's sort of, if you watch enough Vice, you get that sense. So in this particular issue, that's what it's about. And it kind of follows 2 guys that go out to this detox, and both of them are heavy long-term opiate users. And they kind of follow them over a few days and explore the benefits versus the negatives of using marijuana to get off of opiates. They even have a little piece where they interview a Harvard-trained ER physician who's on the front lines of Maine's opiate abuse and get his take on it. And as usual, it comes from a doctor's perspective. This is wrong. It's not medically supervised. It's not driven by medical literature, so they shouldn't do it. That's it. That's pretty much it. I want to get started and really point out to a few particulars that I noted that I think you might find interesting and educational, and give you the overall gist of what I think of the video. Why this is important is this, because I think the video has the potential to send a wrong message. That wrong message could be dangerous, and it could make a lot of lives miserable and make coming off of opiates longer in the short and long run. And maybe if you see my take on it and get some formal understanding, and also if I correct some of the mistakes in the video, you will have a better chance on your own road to recovery. Some of those things, and I have a couple of notes here. Usually I can't read my notes, but I have them anyway. As I said, the setting is in rural Maine, and they start off with some statistics about the opiate overdose crisis and opiate use and abuse and its history. Okay, great. But one of the things that I see over and over throughout this video is an attack on Big Pharma, okay? An attack on pharmaceuticals, whether they're describing, quote unquote, get people away from Big Pharma. And they say things like this or imply things like this from the beginning where the group is getting together all the way to the end. I think this is a wrong approach for many, many, many reasons. Am I a fan of Big Pharma? No. Do I get all kinds of money and kickbacks and I have boats and cars and women and whatever else you can think because I'm an advocate for Big Pharma? No. Do they have their problems? Huge. Okay. But to promote that kind of thinking in society can have a lot of problems. One of them is some folks, by the way, I believe everyone on that show is well-meaning, and I'm not trying to criticize these individuals for them trying to do the best they can. What I'm describing here is really our current cultural attitude and aptitude and delusions, okay? And it's not any individual's fault, but individuals all play a role in it. So I wanted to say that. Back to what I was saying. This sort of overall gross attack on Big Pharma trying to make money, which is sort of this whole episode is riddled with that concept as a reason why you should come to them. And I don't think those guys are making a lot of money out of this. It's wrong, because it is true that Big Pharma is driven by profit. It is true that Big Pharma drives the literature nowadays versus money coming from pure, what I call institutional sources, such as government, so we can do good studies. It is true that most of the studies are difficult to decipher to be able to see that they're garbage. But at the same time, one, that's all we have. Two, we can get through the mud of bad studies and Big Pharma working in what I call unfettered capitalism, the term I stole. And at the same time, keep this in mind, okay? On the other side of it, whether you're talking about the cannabis industry, the legalization of cannabis, or the natural foods industry, or kratom industry, they're the same thing. These are big industries that are trying to make money, and there seems to be no rules, regulations, or application of formal thought, something we can grasp onto to move forward. It's all about slogans. And in that same sense, that whole concept is sort of the underwriting of the way these people feel at this rural backwater detox and moving forward with their emotions and very biased personal defeats, disappointments, and worldview. Keep in mind, Big Pharma and all the people that work there, we created the system that we operate in. So every one of us is individually and collectively responsible for the outcome. We have what we want, unfettered capitalism, okay? We don't want government regulations. We are against FDA. We are against every time somebody within the system tries to apply some formal thinking and thought, if it's a criticism against something individual likes or an industry, they're the bad guy. And if it is for what they want, okay. That being said, this is something that is sort of the underwriting of all this. And that extends to just lack of knowledge about the drugs, okay? And I want to give you a couple of quotes that I saw in there where they're talking about methadone, okay? And when they're talking about methadone, they use terms, you know, as I said, get people away from Big Pharma, get methadone out of your bones, okay? Methadone actually isn't in your bones, and that's a myth, okay? Now, this is someone trying to help someone get off of drugs. Counteract all that poison, the marijuana, and that sentence is supposed to be counteracting all that poison. Let me make it really clear. Addiction is not heroin, fentanyl, methadone, oxys. It's a physiological state that is correctly described as a pathophysiological state, and it's also a mental health issue. And those cross, and it's complex, and it has to do with the individual, the body, the immediate environment that individual has come up in, and society's response to that, okay? It's not about getting methadone out of your bones and marijuana because it's natural, which it is, but it is an industry, and the stuff is processed, and the stuff is manufactured and sold in great quantities. So I want to point that out as well. As much as, just like Big Pharma, there's a big industry for kratom, there's a big industry for marijuana. And also, when we get down to the drugs, Oxy doesn't define addiction. So it doesn't matter if you get it out of the system. Methadone doesn't define what addiction really is once you are an addict in that sense, in the clinical sense. So getting that stuff out of you, purging it out of you means nothing. I've said this many, 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 many times before. Getting the stuff out of someone's system is easy. I can lock you in a room and throw away the keys and it'll be out of your system. Are you any less of an addict? It does remind me of a saying from 12-Step, a dry drunk, right? And essentially it's very applicable, right? And, they're talking about, I believe, the way your thinking is, the way your approach is, how you live your life. But that very much applies to other forms of addiction. In this case, we're talking about opiate addiction. And it doesn't matter if you get this stuff out of your system. There's actually a pathophysiological correlate to this in your central nervous system and things we can measure 3, 4, 5, 6 months out that are red flags and can point to the potential of relapse, okay? So that's something else that I think is important to be noted here. Other than that, you have, these guys doing this, sort of the helpers along the way are getting people clean and so forth. There's 2 characters in here that are quite interesting, okay? The 2 characters that come to get clean, one of them, his name is Bo, the other one is Jason, okay? And Bo, I guess, has been on methadone for many, many, many years. And he comes there to get clean, and he takes in large, large doses of THC. And eventually he gets home. And at the end of the documentary, they tell you 3 weeks out, he's still been clean. The other guy, Jason, as they're filming him while he's there, while he's clean, he actually admits that, he just takes small dabs of opiates. That's extremely concerning, right? He was never clean because when he left, they said, well, he relapsed 3 weeks later. He never quit. He continued to use and was loaded off a very potent, high doses, more than likely, of THC. Being at a place like that doesn't address your other mental health issues. And the idea of getting yourself away from medication that Big Pharma puts out is not the goal of getting clean. At the end of the video, field journalist does a little bit of a reflection on all of this. And he really talks about this great experiment with marijuana as an expression and a reflection of, I think what he's trying to get at is that rugged individualism that describes Americana. You can go back to Thoreau, Emerson, civil disobedience, those of you that understand the history of rugged individualism and what it is to be an American. And he compares what these guys are doing out in the backwoods as this sort of great experiment with marijuana to define its potentials in treating opiate abuse. I completely disagree with him. This is not rugged individualism. I call this postmodernist anarchy. And what that really means for me is anything anyone says is just as valuable as anything anyone else says regarding a particular topic. The subjective becomes the objective. It means that expert opinion means nothing, which you can see as some comments that I get sometimes. And that is what I see happening. It's not necessarily the individual's fault those guys out there. Again, I'm not criticizing them for what they're doing. But when you look at this, and why we got to this place is maybe another video as I move the channel away from just substance abuse. But when you look at this collectively, Vice, a trusted, reputable alternative news network, is putting this out there. It has the potential of sending the wrong message of the possibility of going to this place and getting off opiates using marijuana. And that's dangerous because there's really no data or evidence to support that in the collective, regardless of the few comments I get that, hey, it's got me clean. My own anecdotal experience from running sober living homes, rehabs, methadone clinics, and something that's very unique that is the main thing I run is a medical office, a medical clinic, just strictly dedicated to medication-assisted treatment and medication management. My experience has been those that have been in rehab in my facilities and continue to smoke pot just never were able to get off the ground. And we need to take some lessons from this. Why doesn't Vice do a documentary on the gold standard of what works for opiates, medication-assisted treatment? We have tons and tons and tons of data going back many, many, many years. So all in all, I don't believe there's any evidence that a possible solution at this time is taking in high doses and high quantities of THC. I think the reporting is poor because it doesn't really get to the root of the issue. Absolutely, there's systematic problems, there's systemic problems, and not enough people are getting access to what's needed. And what's needed is a broad social, cultural, public education on the value of medication-assisted treatment, and in addition, getting good mental health for substance abuse, getting good mental health for your other issues, comorbidities, which may be anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, bipolar disease, PTSD, and moving forward in that way where we give people meaningful, formal understanding of what substance abuse is and what real, meaningful, evidence-based treatments are. One other thing they said in there is they described traditional rehabs as extremely expensive, true, and the gold standard. Now, in medicine, gold standard means that treatment which works in terms of treatments. Now, it might be a dangerous treatment or it might be invasive, and we might get other treatments that are less invasive or dangerous, but that treatment may work, or that test may really give you the answer. And he described traditional rehabs as the gold standard for getting better. I disagree. I think traditional rehabs have done quite a bit of damage, and this is not accusing every rehab, but from what I have seen over time and running some myself and dealing with the whole system of insurances and rehabs, traditional rehabs are not necessarily the gold standard. I can get better outcomes than that rehab for pennies on the dollar as an outpatient for a person in my clinical office for pennies on the dollar. I hope that gives you some food for thought. I hope you ponder what I say, whether you agree or disagree with it. That's okay, but think about what I said. Think about what I'm trying to say in this short piece, and like and subscribe. Thank you very much. Take care. Peace.